Imagine two members of the public are asked about their trust in an AI system. This system meets all the guidelines for trustworthy AI. It's accurate, robust, transparent, accountable, fair. Person A says they trust the AI. Person B says they don't. Person B's distrust would appear to be an incorrect belief. They've misunderstood how trustworthy the AI really is. But perhaps we're missing the larger point. Perhaps we've misunderstood what makes AI legitimately trustworthy and what makes someone trust or distrust it. In this paper, we argue for widening the aperture on trustworthy AI to be able to account for complex entanglements with inequitable systems and structures. We propose that those benefiting from these inequitable structures may be predisposed toward trusting AI, whereas those who are systematically disadvantaged may be justifiably predisposed toward distrusting AI. And further, that notions of what makes AI trustworthy have been constructed in alignment with the predispositions of those who are already motivated to trust it. The first part of the paper focuses on how socially applied AI systems contribute to the systematic processes of structural violence that marginalize certain individuals. We argue that they do so by constructing a digital underclass that not only mirrors the non-digital underclass, but also sweeps more and more people into it. We draw heavily on the work of sociologist Herbert Gans, who was interested in the popular rhetoric of undeservingness. He explained the rhetoric of undeservingness is a social tool that maintains the existing social order. It conceives of people at the bottom of the social hierarchy as lazy and generally untrustworthy, and therefore deserving of their place at the bottom. In other words, these aren't inequities which need remedying. These are understandable and merited inequalities. We show how this narrative of undeservingness is being both reproduced and amplified by AI. For example, in making recommendations about the appropriate distribution of resources and opportunities across a population, AI transforms these broad attributions into statistically objective determinations of an individual's deservingness, leading to seemingly justified denial of equitable treatment. Those marginalized in this way experience the negative functions of being classified as belonging to this digital underclass. But there is a flip side to this, the positive functions. We explore how privileged individuals and institutions, most especially, benefit from the construction of a digital underclass and how this informs their inclination to trust AI, in part because it stops them from recognizing the negatives that would promote distrust. For example, AI that appears to more effectively identify individuals who violate laws and social norms serves the positive function of reassuring the privileged that the systems that monitor, monetize, and penalize others are contributing to a safer and generally better society, with only occasional tweaks by good faith specialists needed to keep the AI's trust metrics within the acceptable range. And if AI is operating within this acceptable range, implicitly, we don't need to grapple with messy questions such as for whom AI is making society safer, better, and more profitable. Whether a person experiences the positive or negative functions of AI is linked to their intersectional position within the social structure. Multiply marginalized individuals are both most likely to experience negative functions and be attuned to their potential by virtue of their prior negative experiences of inequitable structures. Whereas comparatively privileged individuals are more likely to experience and be attuned to positive functions. Those attuned to the positive functions will tend to focus on what they gain and therefore need much less convincing of AI's trustworthiness, whereas those attuned to the negative functions will view themselves as having a lot to lose in trusting AI and are more likely to begin from a position of distrust. The second part of the paper critiques trustworthy AI principles as a sufficient basis for establishing trust for those experiencing negative functions. We note that these principles are developed by people for whom the positive functions are clear, and this means that these principles are designed to shore up and preserve the trust they already have in AI. As important as these principles are for promoting trust by those tuned into the positive functions, they're orthogonal to the concerns that provoke distrust by those likely to experience the negative functions. This means that checklists of technical parameters and processes that relate to a very limited notion of trustworthiness are likely to amplify both positive and negative functions, increasing trust for some and quite possibly decreasing trust for others if not seen as irrelevant by them. As befitting the FACT conference, we explore how principles of fairness, accountability, and transparency could be reimagined to address the trustworthiness concerns of those most likely to experience negative functions. Now, this is a radical proposition. It means that the conversation about whose trust matters needs to shift. For those who are likely to benefit, AI use is often discretionary. They have some control over whether they interact with or adopt AI, and this has meant that their trust is highly coveted by those developing it. But the digital underclass generally can't avoid AI they distrust. In effect, their distrust doesn't hinder anything for those who would create and deploy such systems. We still think their distrust matters because it points towards amplification of social harms that should distress most developers and deployers of AI. So, given this state of affairs, what do we recommend? We can't really do justice to our recommendations in the time remaining, so we hope you'll read the paper for these details. But to give you a sense of what to expect, what we do is examine what appear to be the implicit aims guiding each of these principles to see whether these aims actually engage with the deeper issues that create distrust of AI. As an example, when thinking about how transparency can be relevant to fostering trust, we discuss how a strong signal of being committed to being trustworthy is in fact being open and honest about the practical barriers to anticipating and mitigating all harms, thereby facilitating a conversation about how these harms might manifest going forward. Compare this with the more typically backwards-facing aim of disclosing what was done in the development process, implicitly conveying that all issues have been suitably addressed. To conclude, Trustworthy AI has focused on cognitive and affective dimensions of trust, but our paper unveils the important and thus far neglected cognitive dimension, or what informs a person's disposition to trust or distrust AI. The public is frequently polled about their level of trust in AI, and it's not necessarily clear what people mean if they say they distrust it. But even the brief reflection we're able to provide in this paper reveals that distrust by marginalized individuals could be, and quite likely is, entirely logical. While we've offered recommendations that might promote greater trustworthiness, it's important not to confuse this with the explicit aim of reducing distrust of AI. Distrust is a form of resistance, and it can be harnessed to shed light on injustices and discover paths to their dismantling. It's entirely possible that distrust will wane as the field responds to the moral objections of those not traditionally listened to. Then again, distrust may not actually diminish, but instead change in quality or evolve in ways that reflect a changing landscape of social justice concerns. So rather than aiming to eliminate distrust, what's important is that it's listened to, inspiring better, more socially just AI. I'm Bran Knowles, and on behalf of myself and my co-authors, we warmly welcome questions and comments, and thank you very much for listening.